The rain had stopped an hour ago, but Lyrian Ashford still couldn't feel her fingers. She sat on the cold stone steps outside the Thorncrest Pack Hall, her ceremonial dress soaked through, the silver threading meant to honor her mating now clinging to her skin like a shroud. Blood had dried on her knees where she'd fallen when the bond severed. She could still feel the phantom ache in her chest, the place where his wolf had lived inside her for 3 beautiful, foolish weeks. I, Valdric Thorncrest, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, reject you, Lyrian Ashford, as my fated mate. The words echoed in her skull like a death knell. She remembered his face when he said it. Not angry, not cruel, just decided. Like he was signing a trade agreement, disposing of an inconvenient clause. 23 days ago, she'd felt the bond snap into place the moment their eyes met across the Great Hall. He'd been mid-sentence, addressing his counsel about border disputes, when his wolf had surged forward, golden eyes blazing through his human ones. Mate. The word had thundered through her blood, her bones, and her very soul. For 3 weeks, she'd believed she was the luckiest wolf alive. The Alpha King, the most powerful shifter in 5 territories, had chosen her. Lyrian, daughter of a disgraced minor pack, raised by a widowed mother who cleaned floors in the servants' quarters. She'd been nothing, a shadow, a footnote. Then Valdric had looked at her, and she'd become everything. Until tonight. You're a liability, he'd said, his voice carrying across the packed hall where 300 wolves had gathered to witness their formal mating ceremony. My enemies will use you against me. Your bloodline is weak. Your pack allegiance is questionable, and I cannot afford sentiment when I'm building an empire. She'd stood there in her silver dress, in front of every alpha, beta, and council member from 7 packs, while her fated mate listed the reasons she wasn't worth keeping. The bond was a mistake of fate. I'm correcting it. The rejection hit like a blade through her sternum. She'd felt their connection, that golden thread between their souls. Stretch, strain, and snap. Wolves around her had gasped. Some had looked away. A few had smiled. Lyrian had fallen to her knees, and Valdric hadn't even flinched. Now she sat in the rain's aftermath, watching her breath form small clouds that disappeared into nothing. Her wolf was silent inside her, not dead, but wounded so deeply she'd retreated somewhere Lyrian couldn't reach. No one would help her. The servants who'd once been her mother's friends had turned their eyes away when the guards escorted her out. She had no money, no pack, no family left to claim her. Her mother had died 2 winters ago, believing her daughter would one day stand beside the Alpha King. I'm sorry, Mama. I believed it too. The sound of footsteps made her head snap up. A figure emerged from the shadows of the colonnade, tall, dark-haired, moving with the fluid grace of a predator who didn't need to announce his presence. He wore no ceremonial robes, just black leather and an expression that revealed nothing. Lyrian's wolf stirred weakly. Warning, danger, Alpha, not Valdric, someone else. He stopped 3 steps away, studying her with eyes the color of a winter storm, pale gray, almost silver, unreadable. You're the rejected one, he said. Not a question. And you're trespassing on Thorncrest territory. Her voice came out raw, broken. The border is 2 miles east. I know exactly where I am. He descended the remaining steps until he stood directly in front of her. Then, slowly, he removed his coat and draped it over her trembling shoulders. I'm Corvin Nighthollow, he said, and I have a proposition for you. Lyrian looked up at the Alpha of the Nighthollow pack, Valdric's greatest rival, the one wolf he'd been trying to destroy for a decade. She didn't know if fate was saving her or damning her twice in one night. Corvin Nighthollow shouldn't exist. That was the first coherent thought Lyrian managed as she stared up at him. According to everything she'd heard in the Thorncrest pack, he was a monster, a ruthless strategist who'd built the Nighthollow pack into an empire that rivaled Valdric's through manipulation and blood. Yet here he was, offering his coat to a broken woman on her enemy's doorstep. Why? She asked, her teeth chattering. Because you're going to freeze to death in approximately 40 minutes, and I didn't ride 3 hours through the rain to watch that happen. You came here specifically for me? I came here because I heard the Alpha King was publicly rejecting his fated mate tonight. Something flickered in those storm-gray eyes. I wanted to see what kind of woman could make Valdric Thorncrest foolish enough to sever a sacred bond. I'm not anything. That's why he rejected me. No. Corvin crouched down until they were eye level. He rejected you because you terrify him. A mate bond is the one thing an alpha can't control. His wolf would have put you before politics, before power, before his precious empire. And Valdric Thorncrest has never let anything threaten his control. Lyrian wanted to argue, but her body was failing. The bond severance had taken something vital from her. She could feel her wolf fading, curling into a darkness that scared her more than any enemy alpha. Corvin's hand touched her chin, tilting her face up. His fingers were warm, alive. Your wolf is dying, he said quietly. The rejection severed more than the bond. If you stay here, if you try to survive alone, you'll be dead before the next moon. What do you care? I don't. Not yet. He stood, extending his hand. But I could. Come with me, Lyrian Ashford. Let me give you what Valdric was too weak to offer. What's that? A reason to live long enough to make him regret this night for the rest of his immortal life. She stared at his hand, scarred across the knuckles, strong, belonging to a man who'd just offered to weaponize her pain. Behind her, the doors of the great hall opened, light spilled out, along with laughter and music. The celebration was continuing. Valdric had already moved on to entertaining his guests, probably accepting congratulations for his wise decision. The mating ceremony had become a rejection party. Something cracked inside Lyrian. Not her heart. That was already shattered. Something harder. Something that had always believed the world would be fair if she just endured enough. She took Corvin's hand. His grip was firm, warm, steadying. Without a word, he pulled her to her feet and guided her toward the shadows where a massive black horse waited. "Where are you taking me?" she asked as he lifted her onto the saddle. "Night Hollow Keep. My territory. That's 3 days' ride. 2, if we don't stop." He mounted behind her, one arm securing her against his chest. "Can you survive that?" "I don't know." "Then try. Because I didn't find you just to watch you die." The horse surged forward into the darkness, carrying Lyrian away from everything she'd known and everyone who'd betrayed her. She didn't look back. Lyrian woke to firelight and the scent of pine. For a disorienting moment, she thought she was back in her mother's cottage, the small, warm space where she'd grown up believing that goodness would be rewarded and fate knew what it was doing. Then memory crashed over her like ice water. Rejection. Rain. An enemy's coat around her shoulders. She sat up too fast, gasping as pain shot through her chest where the bond had been torn away. The room spun. She was in a bed, an enormous one, draped in dark furs and silver-gray linens. A fire crackled in a stone hearth twice her height. "You've been unconscious for 2 days." Lyrian turned toward the voice. Corvin sat in a chair beside the window, watching her with those unreadable storm-gray eyes. Without his traveling coat, she could see the breadth of his shoulders, the controlled power in his frame. A thin scar traced from his temple to his jaw, a battle wound he'd never bothered to hide. 2 days? Her voice cracked. "Your wolf nearly died. My healer stabilized you, but the damage from the rejection..." He paused. "You'll carry scars. Inside, where no one can see." "I know." She could feel them already. Empty spaces where the bond used to live. Corvin stood, moving to a table where a pitcher of water waited. He poured a glass and brought it to her, helping her sit up enough to drink. His touch was impersonal, but careful. "Why did you save me?" Lyrian asked after draining half the glass. "I told you. I wanted to see what kind of woman..." "The real reason." Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe. or recalculation. Because Valdric Thorncrest destroyed something precious to me 8 years ago, Corvin said. He made it look like a territory dispute, called it collateral damage. His voice remained steady, but his eyes were winter storms. I've been waiting for the right weapon to destroy him, and then he handed me one. I'm not a weapon. Not yet. Corvin sat on the edge of her bed close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. But you could be. You were bonded to him for 3 weeks. You've seen his private chambers, heard his council meetings, and observed his weaknesses. You know things about the Alpha King that no spy could ever learn. You want information. I want justice. There's a difference. He leaned forward. Valdric rejected you because you threatened his control. But imagine if you became something he couldn't ignore, couldn't dismiss, couldn't destroy. Like what? Like a Luna. My Luna. The room tilted. You can't be serious. I'm always serious about strategy. Corvin stood, pacing to the window. In 3 months, every major pack in the territories gathers for the Solstice Summit. Valdric will be there, showcasing his power, his alliances, and his wisdom in rejecting a weak mate. And you'll be there too, standing beside me as the Luna of Night Hollow. Untouchable. Unbroken. Magnificent. That's insane. That's survival. He turned to face her. You have no pack, no protection. If you leave this keep, Valdric's allies will hunt you down. Rejected mates are considered unstable, dangerous. They'll call it mercy when they put you down. But as my Luna, you're beyond their reach. You don't love me? No. And you don't love me. This isn't about romance, Lyrian. It's about revenge and resurrection. His gaze held hers. I'll give you power, protection, and a chance to stand in front of the wolf who threw you away and make him see what he lost. In return, you help me dismantle his alliances. Tell me his weaknesses. Stand beside me as we tear down everything he's built. And if I refuse? Then I'll heal you completely and release you to whatever fate awaits. But know this. Valdric believes you're broken beyond repair. The moment you surface anywhere, he'll send wolves to finish what the rejection started. The fire crackled in the silence. Lyrian thought of Valdric's face as he spoke those words. Liability. Weak. Mistake. She thought of her mother who'd died believing her daughter would rise. She thought of the 3 weeks she'd felt loved, and the 300 witnesses who'd watched her be discarded. If I do this, she said slowly, I want your word that I'm a partner, not a puppet. I have a voice in strategy. I'm not just bait. Something that might have been surprise crossed Corvin's face. You're negotiating terms while barely able to sit up. Those are my terms. He studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. It was a small thing, sharp-edged but genuine. Agreed. Partner, not puppet. Anything else? One more condition. Lyrian held his gaze. When we destroy him, and we will, I want him to know it was me. I want to see his face when he realizes what he threw away. Corvin extended his hand. Then we have a deal, Luna. Lyrian took his hand. His grip was firm, warm. She'd been thrown away in the cold. Now she was being offered a chance to burn everything down. She hoped she'd chosen the right fire. Night Hollow Keep rose from the mist like a predator waiting to strike. Unlike Thorncrest's golden spires and sunlit halls, Corvin's stronghold was carved from black granite, its towers sharp against the gray sky. The walls were ancient, scarred by centuries of battles, yet standing stronger than anything Lyrian had ever seen. Defensive, she thought, remembering how Valdric had once mocked Night Hollow's architecture as primitive paranoia. Now it looked like safety. You'll need to learn everything in 12 weeks, Corvin said, as they passed through iron gates etched with wolf sigils. The Solstice Summit waits for no one. 12 weeks to become a Luna. 12 weeks to look like one. Being one takes longer. Servants lined the courtyard, not the bowing, fearful kind she'd known at Thorncrest, but wolves who met her eyes directly. assessing, curious. Some nodded to Corvin with what looked like genuine respect rather than obligation. A woman with iron-black hair streaked with silver and a commanding presence stepped forward. Her wolf radiated authority. A beta, Lyrian realized, high-ranking. Alpha. The woman's curtsy was precise. This is the Thorncrest reject? This is Lyrian Ashford, Corvin corrected, an edge in his voice. Future Luna of Night Hollow. Treat her accordingly, Marin. Marin's sharp eyes swept over Lyrian, the borrowed clothes, the hollowed cheeks, the barely healed wound where the bond had been severed. Something shifted in her expression. Not pity. Recognition. I'll have chambers prepared in the East Tower, Marin said. And I'll assemble the trainers. Trainers? Lyrian asked. Combat, protocol, pack law, political strategy. Corvin dismounted, then helped her down with careful hands. You survived a public rejection. Now you'll learn to weaponize that survival. Marin stepped closer, lowering her voice. The Alpha doesn't make careless choices. If he brought you here, he believes you can do this. Her gaze hardened. Don't prove him wrong. The next hours blurred into overwhelming fragments. Her chambers were larger than her mother's entire cottage. A sitting room, bedroom, private bathing room with a copper tub fed by heated springs. Servants brought food she couldn't taste, clothes she couldn't imagine wearing, and a leather-bound journal with Corvin's angular handwriting on the first page. These pages contain everything you need to know about Night Hollow, our history, our enemies, our laws. Study them. The wolves here will test you constantly. Some want you to succeed. Others are waiting for you to fail so they can confirm what Valdric proclaimed, that you're weak, unstable, and disposable. Prove them wrong. We dine together each evening at moonrise. Be punctual. We'll use that time to coordinate strategy and assess your progress. Remember our agreement. You help me destroy him. I keep you safe. Everything else is negotiable. Lyrian closed the journal and walked to the window. Through the mist, she could see the distant mountains that separated Night Hollow territory from Thorncrests. Somewhere beyond those peaks, Valdric was probably celebrating his freedom from an inconvenient mate. Let him celebrate, she thought. Let him believe I'm broken and dying somewhere. In 12 weeks, she'd walk into the Solstice Summit and show him exactly what his rejection had created. 3 weeks into her training, Lyrian's wolf finally spoke. He's watching us. She paused mid-strike, her practice blade hovering above the training dummy. Across the courtyard, Corvin stood in the shadows of the colonnade, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He'd been doing this every day, observing her combat lessons, her protocol sessions, her struggles to master pack law. Never interfering, never praising, just watching. That night at dinner, she finally asked, "Why do you hate him so much?" Corvin's fork paused halfway to his mouth. They sat at opposite ends of a table built for 20, candles flickering between them like small barriers. Who says I hate him? You've spent 10 years building alliances against Thorncrest. You rode through a storm to collect his rejected mate. You're turning me into a weapon aimed directly at his heart. Lyrian held his gaze. That's not politics. That's personal. Silence stretched between them. Then Corvin set down his fork and spoke in a voice stripped of its usual control. Her name was Seraphine, my younger sister. Lyrian's breath caught. She was gentle. Too gentle for this world of wolves and territory wars. But she had a gift. She could sense bonds before they formed. Knew when two wolves were fated before they ever met. His jaw tightened. Valdric wanted that gift. Wanted to use it to arrange strategic matings throughout his territory. When she refused to become his tool, he arranged her death. How? A hunting accident. Witnesses claimed a rogue wolf attacked her, but rogues don't carry Thorncrest steel. Corvin's hands clenched on the table. I held her while she died. She was 19 years old. Lyrian thought of her mother, the quiet woman who'd scrubbed floors and believed in fate's goodness until her final breath. I'm sorry, she whispered. I understand wanting someone to pay. Do you? My mother died believing I'd stand beside the Alpha King someday. She worked herself to death in his servants' quarters, and she died grateful for the opportunity. Lyrian's voice hardened. Valdric rejected me in front of the same wolves who watched her bow and scrape for years. He didn't just throw me away, he spat on everything she sacrificed. Corvin studied her across the candlelight. Something shifted in his expression, the wall between Alpha and Asset cracking slightly. I thought you were just angry, he said quietly. I didn't realize you were grieving too. Anger is easier to weaponize. True, but grief? He stood, walking toward her end of the table. Grief is what makes us fight until there's nothing left. It's what separates strategy from obsession. He stopped beside her chair, looking down with those storm-gray eyes that suddenly seemed less cold. I've been treating you like a tool, he admitted. Useful but replaceable. I was wrong. What am I now? An ally. He extended his hand. If you'll have me as one? Lyrian took his hand, feeling the calluses, the warmth, and the strength of a wolf who'd been fighting alone for 8 years. Allies, she agreed. Now let's make them pay, together. The test came 6 weeks before the Solstice Summit. A delegation from the Ashwick Pack arrives tomorrow, Corvin announced during their evening strategy session. Alpha Fenric and his Luna want to discuss border agreements. They're Valdric's closest allies. Lyrian's stomach tightened. They'll recognize me. That's the point. Corvin slid a parchment across the table. Fenric's pack invested heavily in a mining operation Valdric promised would yield silver ore. According to my sources, those mines are nearly depleted. The investment returns Valdric reported? Fabricated. He's stealing from his own allies? He's been doing it for years. Small amounts, carefully hidden, but I have documentation. Corvin's eyes gleamed. What I don't have is someone who's been inside Thorncrest, someone who can speak with authority about what she observed. Lyrian understood. You want me to plant seeds of doubt. I want you to tell the truth. Let them draw their own conclusions. The next evening, Lyrian descended the grand staircase in a gown of midnight blue, silver threading catching the torchlight. Corvin waited at the bottom, dressed in formal black, his expression carefully neutral. But his wolf's gaze swept over her with something that wasn't neutral at all. You look like a Luna, he murmured as she took his arm. I feel like I'm walking into battle. You are. Smile anyway. Alpha Fenric was a barrel-chested wolf with suspicious eyes. His Luna, a sharp-featured woman named Drusilla, studied Lyrian like she was calculating her worth by the second. So this is the rejected one, Fenric said over dinner, not bothering with subtlety. Bold move, Corvin, taking in Valdric's discarded scraps. Lyrian felt Corvin tense beside her, but she spoke before he could. I prefer survivor to scraps, Alpha Fenric. Her voice carried down the table, calm and clear. I survived being bonded to Valdric Thorncrest. I survived learning how he truly operates. And I survived being thrown away when I became inconvenient. Inconvenient how? I asked too many questions about the numbers that didn't match. Lyrian held Fenric's gaze. Investments that showed impossible returns. Pack funds that vanished into projects that only existed on paper. Drusilla's eyes sharpened. What kind of projects? Mining operations mostly, silver ore that never materialized. Returns that were promised but never verified. The table went silent. Fenric's face reddened. You're suggesting... I'm suggesting nothing. Lyrian lifted her wine glass, perfectly composed. I'm simply sharing what I observed during my 3 weeks inside Thorncrest. What you do with that information is entirely your choice. Later, after the delegation had retired to their chambers with barely concealed agitation, Corvin found Lyrian in the library. Fenric demanded copies of my documentation before breakfast, he said. He's already questioning his alliance with Valdric. One crack. The first of many. Corvin's hand brushed her shoulder, brief, warm. You did well tonight, Luna. It was the first time the title didn't feel like a costume. Lyrian smiled. This is only the beginning. The Solstice Summit was held at Crystal Vein Hall, neutral territory nestled between the 5 great pack domains. Lyrian had heard stories about the gathering, how every Alpha, Luna, and high-ranking wolf spent 3 days negotiating alliances, settling disputes, and showcasing their power. She'd dreamed of attending someday as Valdric's mate. Now she'd enter as his enemy's Luna. Remember, Corvin murmured as their carriage approached the glittering hall. We arrive together. We're polite but reserved. We observe. And when Valdric sees me, let him see you. Let him realize you survived. Let him understand what standing beside me means. Corvin's hand covered hers. His wolf will know before his mind does. The bond may be severed, but the memory of it lives in both of you. That sounds painful. For him, it will be agony. The hall blazed with 1,000 candles. Wolves in ceremonial finery filled the grand ballroom, their scents mingling into an overwhelming tapestry of power and politics. Lyrian counted at least 300 guests, representing packs from territories she'd only read about. And there, at the center of the room, surrounded by admirers and allies, stood Valdric Thorncrest. He looked exactly as she remembered. Golden-haired, sharp-jawed, radiating authority like heat from a forge. A beautiful, dark-haired woman stood beside him, laughing at something he'd said. His new intended, perhaps. His replacement. Lyrian's wolf stirred. Not with longing, with something colder. He threw us away. Now we make him watch us rise. Alpha Corvin Night Hollow, the herald announced, and Luna Lyrian of Night Hollow. The ballroom fell silent. Every eye turned toward them. Whispers erupted like wildfire. Lyrian felt the weight of 300 gazes, curious, shocked, and calculating. But she only watched one face. Valdric's expression cycled through recognition, disbelief, and something that looked terrifyingly like rage in the span of 3 heartbeats. His golden eyes flickered, his wolf surging forward before he forced it back. His companion touched his arm. Valdric, what's wrong? He didn't answer. He couldn't stop staring at Lyrian, at the silver gown that hugged her transformed figure, at the moonstone circlet marking her as Luna, at Corvin's hand resting possessively on her waist, at the woman he'd thrown away, standing like a queen beside his greatest enemy. Corvin guided her down the stairs, his pace unhurried and his expression pleasant. Wolves parted before them, some nodding respectfully, others openly gaping. Alpha Fenric approached first, his earlier suspicion replaced by something warmer. Luna Lyrian, I've been sharing your observations with other pack leaders. You've given us much to discuss. I simply shared the truth, Alpha Fenric. What others do with it is their choice. Indeed. Fenric glanced toward Valdric. Some truths are harder to hear than others. The music resumed, a formal waltz signaling the official opening of the summit. Corvin turned to Lyrian, extending his hand with deliberate ceremony. Dance with me, Luna. She took his hand. They moved onto the floor, joining other couples in the ancient steps. Corvin led with surprising grace, his body close enough that she could feel his warmth through the thin silk of her gown. He's watching, Corvin murmured against her ear. I know. I can feel it. His wolf is fighting him. The bond remembers you, even severed. Seeing you in another alpha's arms. Corvin's grip tightened slightly. It's destroying him. Lyrian allowed herself one glance toward Valdric. He stood frozen at the edge of the dance floor, his chest heaving, his eyes blazing gold. The dark-haired woman was speaking urgently, but he wasn't listening. His entire focus was locked on Lyrian, on the way Corvin held her, touched her, and looked at her like she mattered. Then Valdric's wolf broke through. A snarl ripped from his throat, loud enough to stop the music, sharp enough to make wolves stumble backward in alarm. His bones cracked, his form shimmering between human and beast. Mine, The word thundered through the ballroom, primal and possessive and completely unhinged. Corvin stepped in front of Lyrian, his own wolf rising to meet the challenge, but Lyrian moved around him, facing Valdric directly. "No," she said, her voice carrying through the stunned silence. "I was yours. You rejected me in front of 300 wolves. You called me weak, disposable. A mistake." She lifted her chin. "I'm not yours anymore, Valdric. I belong to myself." His wolf howled, a sound of rage and loss and something that might have been regret. But it was far, far too late for regret. The summit continued despite Valdric's breakdown, but the atmosphere had shifted. Wolves whispered in corners. Alliances that had seemed solid began showing cracks. Alpha Fenric wasn't the only one questioning his investments with Thorncrest. 3 other pack leaders had demanded audits before dawn. Lyrian should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt hunted. "He's planning something," she told Corvin that night in their private chambers. "I saw him speaking with his beta after the incident. They kept looking toward me. Let them look. You're protected here. But not everyone I care about is here." Corvin went still. "Explain." "My mother's sister, Aunt Thessaly. She lives in a small village on the border of Thorncrest territory. She took me in after my mother died, cared for me until I was summoned for the mating ceremony." Lyrian's hands trembled. "She's human. No wolf blood, no pack protection. If Valdric wants to hurt me, he'd go through her. She's all I have left." Corvin was already moving toward the door. "I'll send riders tonight. We'll bring her to Night Hollow before—" A knock interrupted him. Marin entered, her face grave. "Alpha. A messenger from Thorncrest." She handed Corvin a sealed letter. He read it, and his expression turned to ice. "What is it?" Lyrian asked. He handed her the letter without a word. "To the false Luna of Night Hollow, your aunt sends her regards from my guest quarters. She's being treated well, for now. Her continued comfort depends entirely on your cooperation. You stole information from my house. You've spread lies that damage my reputation and my alliances. This ends now. Present yourself at Thorncrest by tomorrow's moonrise. Come alone. Confess publicly that your accusations were fabrications born from a rejected mate's spite. Do this, and your aunt will be released unharmed. Refuse, and I'll send her back to you in pieces." Valdric Thorncrest, Alpha King Lyrian's legs gave out. Corvin caught her before she hit the floor. He took her. She couldn't breathe. "I have to go. I have to—" "You're not going anywhere." Corvin's voice was steel. "That's exactly what he wants. The moment you enter Thorncrest alone, you'll never leave. But Thessaly will be rescued, but not by sacrificing yourself." He gripped her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. Valdric's desperate. Desperate wolves make mistakes. We use this." "How?" "The summit doesn't end for 2 more days. Every alpha in 5 territories is here, watching Valdric unravel. If we can prove he's kidnapped a human civilian to manipulate a Luna—" Corvin's smile was sharp. "He won't just lose allies. He'll lose everything." "That takes time. Thessaly doesn't have time." "Then we move fast." He released her shoulders, cupping her face instead. "I have wolves positioned near Thorncrest, scouts who've been mapping his territory for years. While Valdric waits for you to surrender, we'll extract your aunt. And if it fails, it won't. You can't promise that." "No." His thumbs brushed her tears. "But I can promise I'll burn Thorncrest to the ground before I let him take you. And I can promise your aunt matters to me because she matters to you." Lyrian stared at him. This wolf who'd started as strategy, become an ally, and was now offering to risk everything for a human woman he'd never met. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care this much?" Corvin was quiet for a long moment. "Because somewhere between the contract and now," he said softly, "this stopped being about revenge." The rescue party left at midnight. Corvin's best wolves, silent, deadly, loyal beyond question, disappeared into the darkness with orders to bring Thessaly back alive, no matter the cost. Lyrian stood on the tower balcony, watching them go, her heart torn between hope and terror. "You should rest." Corvin's voice came from behind her. "I can't. Not while she's in danger because of me. She's in danger because of him. Don't confuse the two." He moved to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. The moon hung heavy and full, casting silver light across the mountains that separated them from Thorncrest. "When did this become real for you?" Lyrian asked quietly. Corvin didn't pretend to misunderstand. "The night you negotiated terms from a sick bed. You could barely sit up, but you demanded to be a partner, not a puppet." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "I realized then that you weren't going to be easy to control, and I found I didn't want to. I thought you wanted a weapon. I thought I did too." He turned to face her fully. "But weapons don't make you laugh during strategy sessions. They don't challenge every assumption you've held for a decade. They don't make your wolf pace restlessly every time they leave the room." Lyrian's breath caught. "Corvin, I know this wasn't the arrangement. I know you came here for revenge, not—" He stopped, seemingly searching for words. "I'm not good at this. Seraphine used to say I had all the emotional warmth of a glacier. She wasn't wrong. No, but glaciers can crack." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You cracked me, Lyrian. Somewhere between then and now, I stopped seeing a strategic advantage and started seeing you." "I was rejected," she whispered, "thrown away, called weak and disposable. By a fool who couldn't recognize what he had. What if I'm broken? What if the bond damage means I can't—" "You're not broken." Corvin's hand cradled her cheek, warm and steady. "You're scarred. There's a difference. Scars mean you survived, and you didn't just survive, you transformed. You became magnificent." Lyrian felt tears sliding down her face. "I'm terrified." "Of what?" "Of believing this is real, of trusting again, of waking up tomorrow and finding out this was just another performance." "Then let me prove it's not." He kissed her. Not the formal, ceremonial touch they'd shared at their Luna announcement. This was real, desperate and tender and achingly honest. His hands cupped her face like she was precious. Her fingers clutched his shirt like he was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting beneath her feet. When they finally pulled apart, Lyrian was trembling. "That wasn't strategy," Corvin said roughly. "No, it wasn't. I don't know what happens after tomorrow. I don't know if we'll succeed or fail or burn down the world trying. But I know I want to face it with you." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Not as a weapon, not as an arrangement. As something I didn't plan for but can't imagine losing." Lyrian closed her eyes, letting his words sink into the hollow places the rejection had carved. She'd been thrown away once, left for dead. But here, in Corvin's arms, she felt like she'd finally been found. Dawn brought news that made Lyrian's knees buckle with relief. "She's safe." Corvin strode into her chambers, exhaustion lining his face, but triumph blazing in his eyes. "My wolves extracted her an hour ago. She's being brought to Night Hollow as we speak." Lyrian threw her arms around him, sobbing into his chest. He held her tightly, letting her release the terror she'd been carrying all night. "There's more," he said when she finally pulled back. "Valdrick's guards talked. My wolves can be very persuasive when motivated. We have testimony that he ordered the kidnapping directly. We have proof." "What kind of proof?" "Letters in his own hand, instructions to his beta, names, dates, details." Corvin's smile was sharp. Enough to destroy him in front of every alpha at this summit. The final day's assembly was held in Crystalvane's great amphitheater, a circular chamber where pact disputes were formally resolved. Every Alpha, Luna, Beta, and council member from 5 territories sat in tiered rows, watching as the summit's closing ceremonies began. Lyrian stood beside Corvin at the petitioner's entrance, her heart pounding. She wore a gown of deepest crimson, the color of challenge, of blood, of wolves who refused to submit. Alpha Night Hollow. The summit arbiter, an ancient wolf named Kadrin, nodded toward them. You've requested to address the assembly on a matter of grave importance. Proceed. Corvin stepped forward, his voice carrying across the chamber with practiced authority. Honored Alphas, Lunas, and Wolves of the 5 territories. I come before you today, not to discuss borders or trade agreements, but to expose a threat that endangers us all. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Valdric, seated in the place of honor reserved for the Alpha King, went rigid. Yesterday, Alpha Valdric Thorncrest kidnapped a human civilian, an elderly woman with no pack affiliation, no wolf blood, no political value. Corvin let that sink in. He took her for one reason, to force my Luna into surrendering herself to his control. Gasps echoed through the chamber. That's a lie. Valdric shot to his feet, his face flushed with rage. I would never. You would, and you did. Corvin produced a leather satchel. I have letters in your handwriting ordering the abduction. I have testimony from your own guards. I have the woman herself, recovering in my territory, ready to confirm every detail. Kadrin raised a hand for silence. These are serious accusations, Alpha Night Hollow. Alpha Thorncrest, what say you? I say this is a fabrication. Valdric's voice shook with barely controlled fury. A conspiracy between my enemy and the rejected mate I discarded for good reason. She's unstable, delusional. She's been spreading lies about my business dealings since she attached herself to Night Hollow like a parasite. Am I? Lyrian stepped forward, and the chamber fell silent. She walked toward the center of the amphitheater, where all eyes could see her clearly. You called me weak, Valdric, disposable, a mistake of fate that needed correcting. You rejected me in front of 300 wolves because I threatened your precious control. You threatened nothing. You were nothing. Then why did you panic when you saw me alive? She turned to address the assembly. 3 weeks as his bonded mate. That's all I needed to see the cracks in his empire. Investments that existed only on paper. Returns that defied mathematics. PAC funds diverted to projects that never materialized. Lies, Valdric snarled. Alpha Fenric. Lyrian turned to face him. You demanded an audit of your mining investments 3 days ago. What did you find? Fenric's jaw tightened. 70% of the reported returns were fabricated. The mines are nearly depleted. My pack has been systematically deceived for 5 years. The chamber erupted. Other alphas shouted questions, demanded explanations, turned on Valdric with the fury of wolves who'd been played for fools. This proves nothing about the kidnapping, Valdric shouted over the chaos. You're muddying the waters with financial disputes to distract from. Then let the woman speak for herself. Everyone turned toward the entrance. Marin stood there, supporting an elderly woman with silver hair and fierce, familiar eyes. Aunt Thessaly? Lyrian breathed. Thessaly walked slowly to the center of the amphitheater, her human frailty surrounded by hundreds of wolves. But her voice, when she spoke, was steady as iron. 3 days ago, men bearing the Thorncrest sigil dragged me from my home. They put a bag over my head and threw me in a cell. A wolf with golden hair came to see me. She pointed directly at Valdric. That wolf? He told me my niece had to learn her place, and I was the lesson. She's lying, Valdric said, but his voice had lost its certainty. She's human. Humans lie. Enough. Kadrin's voice cracked like thunder. Alpha Valdric Thorncrest, the evidence presented here suggests crimes against pack law, human rights, and the sacred bonds that unite our territories. I hereby call for an immediate vote of no confidence. You can't. I can, and I do. Kadrin turned to the assembly. All who believe Alpha Thorncrest should be stripped of his title and territories, rise now. Chairs scraped. Wolves stood. Fenric rose first, then 3 more alphas, then a dozen, then 30. When the movement stopped, over 2/3 of the assembly stood in condemnation. Valdric looked at the wolves who had once been his allies, his subjects, his admirers, all now standing against him. His face crumpled. Then his eyes found Lyrian. "You did this," he whispered. "You destroyed everything." "No." Lyrian held his gaze without flinching. "You destroyed yourself the night you threw me away. I just made sure everyone saw the truth." Guards moved forward to take Valdric into custody. He didn't resist. He couldn't stop staring at the woman he'd rejected, the woman who'd just ended his reign. "Lyrian," he said, as they dragged him past her. "I don't." Her voice was cold. "You had your chance to speak. You used it to call me weak." She turned her back on him and didn't watch him go. The summit ended in chaos and restructuring. New alliances formed, old hierarchies crumbled. Valdric's territories were divided among the packs he'd defrauded, and a council was established to prevent any single alpha from accumulating such unchecked power again. Lyrian watched it all from Corvin's side, still not quite believing what she'd helped accomplish. That night, in the quiet of their chambers at Crystal Vane, Corvin found her standing at the window, staring at the stars. "You should be celebrating," he said. "I should be many things." She turned to face him. "Instead, I keep thinking about what comes next. The arrangement was revenge. The revenge is complete. So where does that leave us?" Corvin crossed the room slowly, stopping close enough to touch, but waiting. "Where do you want it to leave us?" "I don't know. I've never been good at wanting things for myself. My mother taught me to serve. Valdric taught me to perform. Even with you at first." She laughed softly. "I was so focused on becoming a weapon that I forgot to ask what I actually wanted." "What do you want, Lyrian?" The question hung between them like an invitation. "I want mornings where I don't wake up afraid. I want to build something instead of destroy something. I want—" Her voice broke. "I want this to be real. Not strategy, not performance. Real." Corvin closed the distance between them, cradling her face in his hands. "That night on the balcony, when I kissed you, I meant every moment of it. But I need you to understand something deeper." He took a breath. "This isn't just attraction anymore, it's certainty. You're not someone I fell for by accident. You're someone I'd choose again and again, in every possible version of this life." Tears spilled down Lyrian's cheeks. "I spent so long believing I wasn't worth choosing. Valdric made me feel like loving me was a burden someone had to escape." She touched his face. "You make me feel like loving me is something worth fighting for." "Because it is." His voice was fierce. "And I'll spend the rest of my life proving that to you." He kissed her then, slow and deep and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Corvin smiled, a real smile without edges or calculation. "So what happens now?" Lyrian asked. "Now we go home, not as allies, not as an arrangement." He pressed another kiss to her forehead. "As something neither of us planned, but both of us needed." "That sounds terrifying." "It does," he agreed. "Let's do it anyway." 6 months later, Night Hollow Keep had transformed. The fortress that had once been cold and defensive now hummed with life. Wolves from 3 territories had sought refuge there, displaced by Valdric's fall, searching for a pack that didn't see them as disposable. Lyrian had given them one. She called it the Moonrise Sanctuary, a place for rejected wolves, broken wolves, wolves who'd been told they were weak and worthless and had nowhere else to go. Corvin had initially protested: resources, security, politics. But he'd come around when he saw the first young wolf arrive, trembling and hollow-eyed, and watched Lyrian wrap her in furs and promise her safety. "You're building an army," he'd observed one evening, watching Lyrian train a group of formerly rejected mates in combat techniques. "I'm building a family," she'd corrected. "There's a difference." Now, standing on the balcony where they'd shared their first real kiss, Lyrian watched snow fall gently over the mountains. The same mountains that separated her from the territory where she'd nearly died. Valdric was in exile now, stripped of his title and power, forbidden from entering any allied territory. She'd heard he'd gone mad, his wolf unable to reconcile what his human pride had destroyed. Some said he howled her name in his sleep. Lyrian felt nothing when she heard these stories. Not triumph, not pity. Just the quiet satisfaction of a wound that had finally healed. "You're thinking too hard." Corvin appeared beside her, draping a fur over her shoulders. "Your face gets this crease right here when you overthink." "I'm thinking about fate." "Dangerous territory." "Maybe. But I keep wondering, what if you hadn't ridden out that night? What if you'd chosen a different road? What if you'd seen a rejected wolf on the steps of Thorncrest and decided I wasn't worth the trouble?" Corvin was quiet for a moment. Then he turned her to face him. "I don't believe in fate," he said. "I believe in choices. I chose to ride out that night because I wanted to see what kind of wolf could make Valdric foolish enough to sever a sacred bond. I chose to offer you refuge because I recognized something in you. The same grief, the same fury, the same refusal to stay broken." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "And I chose this because I want to keep choosing you. Every day. For the rest of our lives." Lyrian opened the box. Inside lay a ring of black silver, set with a moonstone that seemed to glow from within. "It was Seraphine's," Corvin said softly. "She told me once that she'd know my true mate by whether I was willing to give it away. I've been carrying it for 8 years, waiting for someone worthy." Tears blurred Lyrian's vision. "Corvin, you don't have to answer now. I just needed you to know that this, us, everything we've built." He took a breath. "It stopped being about revenge a long time ago. You're not a weapon, Lyrian. You're my home." She threw her arms around him, crying and laughing and saying yes, yes, yes against his shoulder, while snow fell around them like a blessing. She'd been rejected once. Thrown away. Left to die. But she'd been found by a wolf who saw her worth when she couldn't see it herself. And together, they'd built something stronger than revenge, deeper than strategy, more lasting than any bond fate could forge or break. They'd built love. And that was worth every scar. Thank you for staying until the very end. If this story touched you, the fight for justice, the power of being chosen when you'd been thrown away, the strength it takes to rise from ashes, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling us your favorite moment and where you're listening from. If you're ready for another story where love conquers the impossible, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss the next chapter. You're the reason these stories exist. Thank you for being here, for listening, for believing that even the most rejected heart can find its way home.